Hi guys, so to be honest it's been a busy winter. The rivers have been out to fettle a lot of the time, so really a lot of the fishing that I've been doing has been on the small still waters. And obviously small still waters in the winter time, it often means the indicator. The bung, the indicator, the float, whatever you want to call it, it's a method that's now just completely ingrained in modern fly fishing. What I have done is put some new flies into the Drop Back Bung range. The Drop Back Bung has been massively successful. We've sold so many of them, and it's been really good, to be honest, to bump into so many anglers on the bank who've come across and said, look, that indicator has been great for me, I've caught so many more fish, seen so many more takes, and it's actually more fun to fish than a normal indicator, and that's what it's all about. So here's what we're talking about. This is what we've sort of coined as the Drop Back Bung. Now, standard indicator fishing is massively popular in small still waters, reservoirs, but it does have some serious limitations when it actually comes to bite detection. So the typical scenario is, with a normal indicator, you cast it out onto the water, the fly sinks, all the time the indicator does nothing, the fly comes to depth and hangs under the indicator, a fish comes along. Now if that fish eats the fly and swims away, the indicator goes under, like everybody's familiar with, you strike and you catch the fish. But there are a lot of other things that happen and a lot of other takes that a standard indicator does not register. And that's really where the Drop Back Bung comes in. Now the concept of this is nothing new. It's based on other forms of fishing, whereby you have an indicator that actually cocks or loads by use of a weight underneath it. Now in this case, the weight required to set this indicator are the flies itself. So basically what we have is on this indicator, if you look down the side of it, you can see in the red section we've got 2 dots, and in the yellow section we've got 3 dots. Now those dots relate directly to the flies that are also available to use this indicator. That means that on this particular indicator it requires 2 flies with a red dot to correctly load it for use. Alternatively, it requires 3 flies with a yellow dot to again correctly load it. So what actually happens when you use it? So as you can see here, I have the indicator on my leader. It's actually held in place by a couple of soft silicone stops, which allows me to change the depth. Below this, I've got 2 flies, both having the red dot on them. So that's going to load this indicator correctly. So now what happens is, when I cast this out into the water, as soon as it lands, this indicator is going to lie flat on the surface of the water. What I'll do is, when I've casted it out, I'll actually count quietly in my head how long it takes for this to stand on end. Let's say it takes 4 seconds. So I cast out, the indicator lands, I count to 4 and it stands on end very smartly like that. I now know that my flies are hanging freely in the water column. They're not stuck on anything, they're not on weed, they're not on the bottom, and they're set at a fishing depth. Now, let's say a fish comes along. It comes along and takes a look at the fly, but it doesn't eat it. So it swims past it. Now every time a fish swims past something under the water, it creates a little bit of a vortex. That's going to move the fly. Now with a normal indicator, you might, if you've got very, very good eyesight, see it shake a little bit. With the drop back indicator, what you'll see is this indicator will throw in a little circle. So that lets me know that there's a fish near the flies. That's the first thing that it gives you. That's the first bit of information that you get that you don't get with a normal indicator. So if I see that move around a little circle, I can move the indicator a little bit, move the flies, and maybe tempt him into eating it. So let's say he eats it. The typical take that you'll get with any indicator is the fish eats the fly, swims away. Indicator goes under. If it does it, strike, perfect. The reality is, a lot of times those fish will swim up to the fly and they will very, very tentatively take that fly in the mouth and they will not swim away. That's particularly true on picky or pressured fish that have seen a lot of pressure. With a standard indicator, The angler is completely unaware that that has happened. That's where this really comes into its own. The second a fish takes one of those flies into its mouth, it removes a lot of the weight that is required to make this stand on end. So what happens is, this indicator goes from sitting in the water like this to jumping out the water and lying flat on the surface. Now that is a very, very hittable take. That is an extra fish in your net every time it does it, because with a standard indicator you cannot see that happen. So this indicator on its day can sometimes give you anywhere from 20 to even 100% more takes. It is that efficient at registering a take when a fish picks the fly up and doesn't swim off with it. As well as that, it's got a host of other benefits over a standard indicator. You remember we talked a little bit right at the start about counting down how long it takes before the indicator stands on end. If I count and I know that it takes around 4 seconds for this indicator to cock, to stand on end, I make a cast and it takes longer than 4 seconds, there's one of two things happened. The fly has either fouled something as it's sinking, it's landed on a piece of weed or in a slightly shallower area of the lake, which means I need to take it out and recast, or more importantly, one of the flies has been eaten while it's sinking. So whenever I fish this method and I throw it out, if that indicator does not stand on end in the time I'm expecting, I set the hook. The number of times that there's a fish that has eaten that fly as it's sinking, again, over the course of the day, puts those extra 1, 2, 3, 4 fish in the net. Again, that's something else that you cannot see with a standard indicator. So some of the other things that it's good at. Standard indicators. If you want to fish them at long range, they're very, very air resistant. They're very, very difficult, particularly with a big indicator, to cast it a long way. When you cast with a drop back bung, it actually lies flat along the line. So you get no drag. So it cuts through the air very, very efficiently. When you get it out there at long range, you get a take, you set the hook. A normal indicator grabs the water when you strike, and you'll often hear that great big gloop as it pulls through the water. That prevents you from setting the hook at long range. The drop back bung falls completely flat when you strike, and you'll notice when you fish it at long range and you set the hook, it takes a lot less effort and the contact to the fly is massively quicker than it is with a standard indicator. All in all, this indicator over the last 4 to 5 years has put so many more fish in the net for me, both just on pleasure days and in competitions where indicators like this are allowed. It's been an absolute revelation for me. So some of the new patterns that I've done, some of them modifications on old favourites, and some of them are a little bit different to what you would normally expect. So first one, a modification on the ever deadly apse worm, or a rubber bloodworm, whatever you want to call it. It's got lots of different names. Basically what I've done is added these in the range in all of the applicable colours, olive, tan, red, with the correct weighting to fish under the bung. A lot of people like to fish bloodworm patterns under the bung. For me personally, I much prefer to use them as pulling flies. So with the tungsten bead on them, these actually make a really good version of the worm for either use under the bung or with pulling tactics. Because you've got the very heavy tungsten drop bead, you get a real nice sink and draw action with it, which really works those rubber legs. So the worm, great pattern. Nothing new here other than a little bit of the colour scheme and the fact that they're weighted to match the bung, but obviously the ubiquitous blob in lots and lots of different shades. Personally, I prefer the more pastel colours a lot of the time. A lot of people fish with bright orange and chartreuse and things like that. That's great when the fish aren't that picky, but when they've had a little bit of pressure, some of these washed out colours, like this sort of peach and yellow colour, can be really, really good. So I've done a range of blobs, again in the right weights for the bung, in a range of colours. Then this one, always a controversial fly. This is actually what they call a chamois. Now, there's actually nothing new at all about using chamois leather for tying flies. If you go right back, you can find chamois leather flies being used in North America many, many years ago. But in the UK, probably in the last 8 to 10 years, it's become a bit of a phenomenon, really popularised by a guy called Davy Nielsen, a northeast fly angler, a really good small stillwater angler. Now, I'll be honest, the chamois, in all of its guises, used to be one of my bogey flies. The reason being, you get an awful lot of takes with it, but you used to miss an awful lot of fish as well. So really all I've done is take the chamois pattern in a range of colours, and I've modified it and taken a lead from some of the balanced flies that you often see, again from North America, where we've got the tungsten bead dressed onto a pin on the back of the hook, which presents the fly sitting horizontal in the water instead of vertical. And for me anyway, it's really increased the number of takes that convert into hooked fish when I'm fishing a chamois pattern under the indicator. So just by changing the way it's weighted, for me, certainly anyway, it's given me more positive hookups rather than missing a lot of fish with it. It's like anything else. On its day you still do miss fish, nothing's foolproof, but for me anyway, it seems to have improved it. And finally, I've done some new egg flies. You remember some of the egg flies I've done previously, a lot smaller, and the small worms, those have been absolutely killer patterns. But sometimes a bigger egg fly is what they want in the winter, especially when it's cold. So I've done a range of egg flies, slightly bigger, and then what I've added in the back is just a spot of glow bright floss, very, very bright. So when these things get wet, they're nice and translucent, but with a lovely bright hot spot in the middle. Absolutely deadly on stillwater rainbows. Give them a try under Drop Back Bung. I'm sure you'll get a lot more takes and hopefully a lot more fish in the net.